Sup, freaks? It's your boy Marty here to introduce this episode of Tales from the Crypt. I had the immense pleasure of sitting down with Graham Krizek from the Voltage team, helping to build hosting services for Lightning users, so they can use Lightning without having to maintain their own node. Sorry, I can't speak this morning, freaks. Hey, Winston. Winston, have you heard about the Cash App? Cash App's helping you stack sats, send sats, sell sats, receive sats. We're saying sats because you can make sats a standard in the app. There's no more buying fractions of a Bitcoin. You're stacking whole sats, whether it's tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions if you're a baller. You can make sats a standard in the app. You can even DCA it. You can set it and forget it. If you want to buy daily, weekly, bi-weekly, you can set that up in the app. We are front-running Matt Odell, who's buying at 4:17 a.m. Eastern time, I found out. So we got to front-run him. Somebody's got to wake up at 4:15. 2-minute front-run of Matt Odell there. On top of that, you can stack slivers of stonks on the apps. You can use the Cash App as your bank account. They're offering account number and routing numbers for individuals who don't want to use a traditional bank. You can get your paychecks direct deposited into the Cash App. You get their Boost card, accepted anywhere. Visa's accepted. You save money at Boost partner merchants. There's a bunch of things going on. So when you do download the Cash App, make sure you use the code STACKINGSATS. That's STACKINGSATS. You're going to get $10, and $10 is going to go to Owls Lacrosse. Winston, that's Owls Lacrosse. Whoo, 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 whoo. Stacking sats, Owls Lacrosse. Winston, what do you think about the Cash App? You're a dog. You're not even going to be able to use it. Sucks for you. Enjoy this episode. Tiki.
You've had a dynamic where money's become freer than free.
If you talk about a Fed just gone nuts, all the central banks going nuts.
So it's all acting like safe haven.
I believe that in a world where central bankers are tripping over themselves to devalue their currency, Bitcoin wins. In the world of fiat currencies, Bitcoin is the victor.
I mean, that's part of the bull case for Bitcoin.
If you're not paying attention, you probably should be.
Well, hey there, freaks. It's your boy Marty Bent here to introduce. What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's your boy Marty here. Coffee rip, Friday morning. Vibes are high. Very excited for this conversation. Sitting down with Graham Krizek, founder of Voltage. Just as I start the conversation, I have my son screaming in the background, so sorry if he's bothering you, Graham. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. What's up, freaks? Happy to be here.
I've
wanted to say that for a long time.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
It's, I guess we've been in contact, the last few weeks. Ryan and I discussed what you were building at Voltage before recording and while we were recording, and said I had to reach out. It's the service that you're providing, basically allowing people to spin up Lightning nodes in the cloud, I would argue is going to be completely necessary as we attempt to scale out this network. We'll get into exactly what you're doing at Voltage, why you built it, how it works, and what you offer individuals. But before that, how did you come to Bitcoin? How did you get to a point where you decided to build a company focused on allowing people to have a better experience in the Lightning Network particularly?
Yeah, sure. So I originally found out about Bitcoin about mid-2011, so a little while ago. I first came to it by learning about the Silk Road. Heard there's this website that you can like buy and sell anything on, and no one could stop, prevent you from doing that essentially. And I was really fascinated by how is this possible? How are people not able to shut down these servers? Just stop the bank accounts? How is it possible that people can't censor this? And so I started learning more about it, and I found, Bitcoin, Tor, PGP encryption, all of the stuff that powered the Silk Road. And I was just fascinated by it. I was just really hooked at the economic properties, the technology behind it. It was really just so eye-opening to me. And I was just really hooked from there. And so that was mid 2011. I kind of just stayed with it as like a hobby for a while and just kind of like bought and sold with people in like local Bitcoins, did a little bit on Mt. Gox, kind of just played around with it for a while. Um, Ended up, I guess I was when I was starting my freshman year of college. So I played with it through college. Switched my major several times through college. Ended up getting a business degree, then going straight into software, like software engineer. So by the time I learned I wanted to be a software engineer, it would have been way too much money and way too many more years of school. So I just did business and then went to a software engineer by trade. So over the last several years, I've focused on like cloud infrastructure essentially through software engineering, and still maintaining that Bitcoin, as a hobby. And, during the 2017, ICO craziness, I participated in a lot of like hackathons and stuff like that and like Ethereum projects just because that was, the new thing to do. And it was fun. And oddly enough, all of those Ethereum like hackathons always paid out in Bitcoin. So I was always trying to win Bitcoin through these Ethereum projects. So that was cool to see. After kind of 2017 was cooled down, I kind of wanted to like get back to my roots and focus more on like Bitcoin Core. So I started looking at like what I could contribute there. I don't know C++ very well, so like contributing directly to the code was like probably not. I wasn't probably not going to do that. So I focused on their CI/CD platform. Tried to make some of their testing and their test suites and a lot of their automation a little better. So worked on that for a little bit, and then I got hooked up with Travis Kling and the guys at Ikigai Asset Management. Awesome people, shout out Ikigai. Started work with them for a while, built out some of their quantitative infrastructure and a lot of what they do on the technology side. Worked with them for a while. Once that came to a close, I was really kind of like, man, what am I going to do next? Like, I've been kind of going like on this Bitcoin thing for a while, just doing random things. Like, what should I do next? I decided to look at Lightning again. I originally looked at Lightning in like 2018, and it was very, that was like very, very early days. So it was cool, but it wasn't built out like it is today. So I wanted to take a second look at it. I tried to set up a node on a Raspberry Pi at home, and it was just a horrible process. Like nothing would work. My disk got corrupted and like power failures, corrupted the LND database. It was a mess. And so I was like, man, this is not fun. So I'm going to try and spin it up in the cloud because like that's what I know and love. So I did that, and it was way easier and I was like, man, okay, not everyone can just go spin up a cloud server. Not everyone has that knowledge to know how to do that. So there's got to be a service that's like offering this like for people, right? So I look and like there's nothing out there that's really doing it. So I found that interesting. So I started basically creating the building blocks of, what would that take to have a hosted Lightning node service. And I really just never stopped. Everything kind of kept lining up. Like the ideas I had on how to build it, all kind of made sense and worked out. And the more people I talked to, people were really pumped about it and thought it was a great service. So it just kept building and never really stopped. And that's, I guess, where we are today with, Voltage being an official service now that, you can sign up with.
Yeah. I mean, I've experienced the same problems that you did too. And for our TFTC store, I didn't spin it up, but I paid a developer to spin us up a node in the cloud just so we could have 100% uptime and confidence that the store is going to work.
Right.
And yeah, but we had to go through, set up an AWS cloud instance, connect our node, just work via a UX flow that was not catered to a Lightning node operator.
Yeah.
So I assume that's why I'm excited to be speaking with you today, because that was somewhat of a very manual and chunky process. And it seems that what you're working on at Voltage is aiming to make that as seamless as possible. So how does it work? What are the benefits? What are the trade-offs, I guess, is a better question to pose for that particular question. And then like how does the hardware infrastructure work? Like, do you have the servers? Are they located in the US? What's the deal with that as well?
Sure. So Voltage is a cloud infrastructure provider for Bitcoin and in Lightning Network. So through our platform, you're able to, create a Lightning node with just like a few clicks of a button. It's ready in about 2 minutes. So we make it really easy for you to create your own dedicated always on Lightning node in the cloud. And so you still maintain the ability to adjust your settings, your funds, everything is completely under your control. What we automate is like backups, your uptime, the configurations, the networking, all of the like non-sexy stuff in the background. That's what we handle for you and just give you like a nice UI with like, a couple buttons and you're off. So that's what we do. So when you're talking about benefits, I think the benefits are probably obvious of like you don't have to maintain hardware, you don't have to do any of the technical bits to like install LND. When you're talking about upgrades, like I know you've talked on your podcast a while about staying up to date with the latest releases and everything like that. Through our platform is one click and you're updated. So the ease of use is a big plus. The trade-off is it's a trusted service. There's no way to run Lightning nodes in a trustless way right now. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast. So how our system works is I wrote a blog post about this that everyone should go read that is interested in it, but we have modified LND. We've modified the code in a few places and submitted PRs back up to the upstream project, but we do not write macaroons to disk ever. So we never are able to see users' credentials. We encrypt all sensitive information like your TLS keys. We encrypt those to your seed. So we can't like man in the middle your requests and see, what's going on, grab passwords, things like that. Same with the Tor private key. So we have modified LND in a way to make it totally non-custodial, meaning we cannot see what's going on in your node. Even if we wanted to go and see what transactions you're doing, anything like that, we can't even see your peers because we route through Tor. So all we see is Tor entry nodes. So we have made this as secure and as non-custodial as possible. Which is something that no one else in the space has done. Like I said, the modifications we did to LND were we literally made and submitted them back up. So we run, our platform is the most secure platform to run a Lightning node as it exists today. Speaking more of the infrastructure side, we do run on AWS. So we run in the cloud. They are US based right now. We're working on co-locating to maybe European Union or European zone for anyone that wants that. And so everything is encrypted all the time inside of our network and out. When you're talking about traffic going across services inside of our network, everything is encrypted to keys that we don't manage. And all disks are encrypted. The memory on the servers is encrypted. So that there's literally nothing that is ever unencrypted. The only time is when keys need to be signed through memory, which is still the memory is encrypted. So through using a provider like AWS, we're able to scale like crazy, and we are able to get the best types of servers that are out there. So making sure that your node is as performant as humanly possible. And then we're able to still maintain that level of trust and security through just encrypting it with things that AWS can't see and can't manage. So that's a good rundown of our infrastructure, and through that we are able to give a really nice service that is very highly available and very scalable, while still maintaining that level of confidentiality and privacy that users want in Lightning. So through that, like I said, we can't see anything on your node. We could not, take your money if we wanted to. But at the end of the day, you have to trust us to keep your node up, because that's, if your node's down, it can't sign messages, that kind of thing. So that's ultimately the only, trade-off you have to take, is that you are trusting us to keep your node online so it can sign these messages and, do the things that it needs to do. But besides that, you are in complete control of your funds, your channels, everything is totally on you.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible that you're able to limit the, attack surface as much as you guys have by encrypting everything. And so let's dive into that. Like, how does that work specifically? I noticed last week you were you quote tweeted Oliver Gugger, who had a PR merged into L&D that's been sitting around for 2.5 years. That allows people like Voltage to create nodes without leaving unencrypted macaroons behind on the infrastructure. So I guess we should get into the nature of macaroons, unencrypted versus encrypted macaroons, and how you achieve encryption.
Yep. So how, like, I guess L&D works today in like the latest version, which is 0.11.1. The only way that you can manage macaroons are when you create an L&D instance, they're written to disk, like right beside, the L&D database, like on the server. And that's how historically that has always been, is they're just written to disk right beside it. And for those that don't know, your macaroon is essentially your credential into the L&D instance. It's what you use to send money, look at your transactions, all of that stuff. It controls the funds. And so historically, it's always been written to disk. Well, Oliver did, 2.5 years ago, that just got merged in, I think, like last week, was he created a modification where you can pass in a flag when you're like initializing or unlocking your L&D node to have it pass back the macaroon in like the API response instead of writing it to disk. So by doing that, and by keeping everything encrypted from the user's request to the node process itself, we are never able to see the macaroon. So it's never written to disk. We don't have to like ever worry about that. And it's passed back directly to the client. So the user, it's client side at that point, and we're not able to ever see that in the process. And then so what we do at that point is encrypt it to the user's password that they use to unlock, their node, or the password they set up for their node. We encrypt it to their password, and then we back it up into our API. And so the backup we have is still encrypted to the password. So if you lose your password, you're still SOL, and we can't do anything about it. But by encrypting it to the password, we're able to make it a really nice way to connect in. So through our dashboard, if you want to connect, we have a bunch of easy connection options for like L&D Connect from like Zap, Zeus, all of the popular software. We essentially pass back that encrypted macaroon and then prompt you for your password, like, hey, you need to unlock this so we can generate a connection code for you. And then once they unlock it, we do that, and that's all client side. And our dashboard is open source, so you can verify everything that I'm saying. You can see what requests we are sending to your node, what requests are sending to our API. So by creating a dashboard that manages both, we can do those really nice things of, okay, we can get information from your node from our API, but then your requests go straight to your node, and we don't proxy anything in the middle. And we also do that. It's worth mentioning that we make that possible by installing Trusted Ssl certificates on all of our L&D nodes. So that means that it's signed by a certificate provider. So if you would pull up like your API in the dashboard, it's has like the green lock in like Google Chrome, meaning that like it's not a self-signed certificate, it's trusted. And then through that, we're able to make requests directly into your node without having to do any kind of weird tricks. It just works, as it should in an API.
Yeah. Seems very well thought out from a security and privacy perspective.
I mean, that's what. So go ahead.
That's what I was gonna go back to this particular PR. Like, was this like low key one of the sneakiest boons to Lightning Network privacy in a while?
I mean, I think all
in terms
all
of interacting, probably in terms of interacting with services via Lightning.
Yeah, I mean, I think Oliver made this a while ago, kind of with people like Voltage in mind, and also just for a way for users to run on like maybe like less trusted hardware and still get the same assurances. So I think they always had this in mind. I think it took 2.5 years. It wasn't in development for 2.5 years. It frankly just kind of sat there for a while because I just think it wasn't a priority for anyone, and it just things happened. And so yeah, I mean, so when we were designing this system, that's what that's what we wanted to do, was create a system that is like, as secure and still maintains that level of like user privacy and control that you get when you're running your own node. We wanted to maintain that, even doing a hosted node solution. And that's why that was like step zero in building this, was how can we run these nodes without having access to them? And if we couldn't do that, we wouldn't have done this at all. Because we're Bitcoiners, like we want to ensure that privacy, that that level of security through the whole process. And so that looking at the stateless init PR and things like that, we're definitely step zero in designing our services, because like I said, I mean, we want the utmost privacy and control for our users. And if we couldn't do that, we wouldn't have built it. So luckily, through several modifications, some updates to L&D, we're able to achieve that in a way we're pleased with.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating and incredibly bullish in my mind that you guys were able to crack this nut specifically, and then Lightning as a protocol was able to get this macaroon problem solved, so that services like yours can be built. And I guess that just naturally leads me to the question: like, how do we scale Lightning? Like, is a scale via companies like Voltage, a combination of Voltages and Uncle Jims around the world? Like, what is a sufficient and comfortable trade-off for you in terms of hosted services versus do-it-yourself, completely self-custody nodes running your own hardware?
Yeah. So it's a great question. So one of the biggest things I think as part of your question is like centralization of the network, and I think so there's like several things to unpack there. And one, so like let's have the scenario of 95% of the Lightning network would be running on Voltage. Say one day that exists where 95% of the network is running on Voltage. We still could not do any kind of network level attacks like stealing routing fees or doing any of those things, because what I just talked about of not being able to get into nodes. So when you're talking about security of the network, even if we ran like the whole network, we could never steal fees, any of that kind of trickery. When people are talking about Lightning vulnerabilities and how you could, if you set up enough nodes, you can do some routing fee trickery, stuff like that. Like that's not possible. So the way we see ourselves is we're definitely going to be aiding in like the bootstrapping of the network, which I think we're still there. I think we're at like 14,000 plus nodes on the network according to 1ML. And we want to get to like 1 million plus nodes, right? We want like everyone running this. I guess 1 million's even low for everyone running a Lightning node, but we see this as a really good bootstrapping opportunity to where. So if you want to run a node at home, I mean, you're looking at $400 or $500 like all in to just like get started and play with it. And like, I think that's a pretty big non-starter for a lot of people. And then, so you're left with the mobile wallets, which are either custodial or don't have as many, you can't do as much with those as you could with your own nodes. So before Voltage, you're left with like those two options, and neither one of them are that great. And so through our service, you can spend $10 a month, $30 a month, depending on what plan you want, and you can get online in 2 minutes to start playing with it. So one, we see it as a really good bootstrapping opportunity where people can get online quickly, and then once they're more comfortable with Lightning, maybe they move on to their own hardware. Like that's we don't want to be running 100% of the network. We want it to be a decentralized system where people are running their own nodes. People are using hosted services like us. So we see it as a really good opportunity to get people on board easily, quickly. And then maybe, after they play with it for a little while, they get comfortable and they're like, all right, I do want to run my own node at home. I do want to take the next step and go even deeper into this. So that's one important point to make. The other is, I mean, there is already like competition, and there will be more competition. So like, I don't think it'll be a one provider for all. I think there'll be several, which increases the centralization aspect of it. And then another aspect of it is we're inside of our own system. Say we do control a lot of the things. We're very conscious of dispersing like our work, making it very HA, dispersing our workloads across the world into multiple zones, multiple cloud providers. we're going to be doing that. So it's we are reducing the single point of failure, as much as possible through the network, even for those running on, on voltage.
Yeah, it was going to be my next question. Do you plan on diversifying, not away from AWS, but diversifying the service providers beyond them?
Yeah, definitely. That's on our roadmap to use multiple cloud providers, use multiple locations across the world. That's all very easy to do. It's just a matter of time. And so, yeah, that's definitely something that we're planning on doing.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. How's reception been so far? Like, do you find a lot of the people engaging with voltage are individual users? Like, do you guys envision yourself servicing a lot of enterprise clients, exchanges, anything like that?
Yeah, so when we launched first, we had our one plan, which was is an LND node that is backed by like a Bitcoin full node. And that is $27 a month. So that was like perfect for people like Jack from Thunder Games is running on voltage now. We're working with the Sphinx people to run their tribes. We have Adam Curry is a voltage user. So a lot of those people are really on board with it. As far as individual users go, they thought that $27 price point was a little high, which I get. And so we introduced this last week called light nodes, which are $10 a month, which are backed by Neutrino instead of a Bitcoin full node. So for people that are just trying to get a quick, test node or just want a personal node, I think it works great, and it's great for the personal aspect of it. So
yeah, so I've read that blog post because you shared it in our TFTC tribe.
Yep,
Thank you for joining the tribe. In Sphinx, Sphinx. I keep saying Sphinx. And so does Neutrino, just from using less data, I guess, with the block headers, that you're able to get a lower price at AWS?
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, you don't like running a Bitcoin full node is expensive, frankly, and so you don't have to do that with Neutrino. It kind of just queries like the entire Bitcoin network and does things without requiring a full Bitcoin node to connect to. So it's a cheaper infrastructure cost for us. So then we can just charge a cheaper price for the end user ultimately. It's just a matter of hardware at that point. We don't have to run a Bitcoin full node for a Neutrino based light node.
Yeah. Man, it's crazy. So how, again, getting back to Thunder Games and Sphinx, how do they see you as a service provider? And I mean, just using Sphinx this week, it seems to be working pretty flawlessly, at least the Lightning payments and streaming payments and boosting podcasts like mid-episode. The experience they're building there is pretty sweet.
Yeah, so I think originally, like that's what we hear like from like a majority of our customers is like, man, like this is great. Like I did not want to run my own servers, but like, I just had to by necessity. I heard a lot of people running like BTC Pay server just for a Lightning node because it was like the easiest way to set it up. So those people that were forced to run their own node just because like that was the only option, those people are really coming to us in big numbers, which is great. We're that's kind of our original target market essentially. So that's good to see. So with people, I'm really excited about what Sphinx is building because I see that as like one of the great use cases. Like originally, I'm one of those people that think that the paying for coffee with Lightning is going to be like much later. I don't think that's like the killer use case right now. I think things like what Sphinx is doing with podcasting is definitely the way things are going to build out right now. It's so cool to be able to like stream TFTC and just boost when I like something that you hear, and being able to stream sats as I listen. My wallet's almost empty now because I listened to RHR last night and it damn near drained me.
I'm sorry, I got to set the sats per minute at a reasonable rate.
No, that's fine. I got to refill it. I've been using it too much. So I mean, things like that is like it's so cool.
Well, let's jump into this. Why do you think the application of Lightning Network towards things like streaming payments and micropayments will come before buying coffee.
So I think so what gets me super amped up about like Bitcoin and Lightning Network and everything is just the peer-to-peer aspect of it, which is, kind of like, a fundamental piece of it. I love the idea of being able to pay like a content creator directly and, having it being like uncensorable. Spotify can't take it down, and you don't have to do ads, for revenue, things like that. Being able to pay a content creator directly, that's so cool to me. And thinking about like Netflix that does like, instead of a subscription base, you pay per minute of a video you're watching. I don't know if people still like rent movies anymore, but like if you did that, instead of paying $5 for a movie that you maybe watch 15 minutes of and it sucks and you don't want to watch it anymore, you just pay per minute. And oh, this sucks, okay, well I wasted 5 cents on this, who cares, kind of thing. I think it just drastically makes us rethink the relationship between the users and the content creators, and it makes that connection, like the content creator is tied to the user, not their advertisers, not to the platform. I think that it really just changes the whole dynamic on the monetization and the connection between those two, which is what you guys are doing with like the tribe and everything. I mean, what you guys talked about on RHR last night, I think it's
exactly.
I think it's
let's dive
so
into
cool.
this. I'd love to keep having this conversation and build on what Matt and I discussed on RHR last night, like the incentive structure that this creates between the listener and the content creator. Like it sort of lights a fire under our ass to produce good content. And like Matt said last night, like you can sort of get stats of I don't want to say average minutes listened per podcast, but you can sort of tell if you're making good points toward the end and people are boosting it, like, hey, people must be listening at least this far the way through. Or you could probably actually tell by how many sats are streamed to you by the number of downloads times the sats per minute ratio.
And I think it's I think it's just it's great. And I think that being able to get like that instant feedback from like you as a content creator too is incredible. And like being able to like boost like on like specific quotes, like, oh, these people really like when I say this, like I'm gonna say this every episode kind of thing. Like I mean, I think it gives you the ability as a content creator to make something that your listeners really want to hear and just create good content. And then the whole like uncensorability of it is like another big thing, especially like today, in today's world where is getting like the amount of censorship is getting like freaky. And so I think this stuff is gonna be, more and more important,
I completely agree.
by the year. I mean, maybe even quicker than that.
It seems like the pace of the censoring is quickening. I mean, the whole Twitter like warning stuff. I love that meme that's taken off this week of people just photoshopping revolutionaries throughout history and like Twitter fact checking them. Paul Revere, the British are coming. Let's fact check the British tax system.
Yeah, no, that's hilarious. What I think one of the greatest things that's come out of this election is the memeing, and the content that has come out of it has been just gold. But yeah, I mean, when you like, I haven't dug into it that much, but I don't get how like Jack Dorsey, he's such a Bitcoiner, but like, how is Twitter like censoring like this? And like, I don't understand the connect there between like Jack and this, and maybe he's like totally removed from it. I don't know, but it's crazy.
I agree. It's disappointing to say the least, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I get a lot of shit. Having disclaimer, Cash App, Jack's also CEO Square sponsor. No, I mean, I've made this public before. Like, I feel bad for Jack. I would never want to be in that position. And I question how much actual power he has over the decision making on a lot of the stuff that goes on.
Right. I don't know. If I was Jack, I would probably maybe ditch Twitter and just focus on building Bitcoin everywhere.
Either that, or just if you feel like your baby's being taken from you, just put your fucking foot down and be like, let's not do this anymore.
Yep.
Who knows? Disclaimer: sponsor of the pod. You seem very passionate about the ability to do things in a non-custodial way and avoid censorship and deplatforming.
Mm-hmm.
What is it like? Were these values that were very important to you before discovering Bitcoin, and Bitcoin sort of solidify them, or has your Bitcoin journey sort of brought these to the forefront of your mind?
So yeah, a little bit of both. Like I've always been sort of like I guess a libertarian minded person. And I think when I found when I found the Silk Road way back in like 2011, that's part of the reason I clung to it so much as well, is like the whole liberty aspect of it. And then, it's like, it was kind of like that fire was there in me. And then seeing this community of people that are like, making it happen and are like way more amped up about it than I am, really, I guess, accelerated the fire. So it's been something that I've always been passionate about, but I think it's easy to get disgruntled about like the lack of control you have in being, censored or tracked or whatever, and like in Web 2 and through these Google, Facebook, Twitter, all of these places, you just have very little control, and it's just extremely hard and extremely tiring to like avoid the tracking and still like use the tools like normal. So that's why I really focus on it when building Lightning and Bitcoin, is that we need to give people that option, right? Like you basically don't have that option in Web 2, so like we need to make that an option in Web 3, and like that needs to be like a foundation on how we're building this next stage of the internet, because it's like it's almost impossible to use like Web 2 and not have that in your life in some way, not be tracked or whatever. So that's just I think that's ultimately why I'm so passionate about it now, is like that has to be an option. Like that is not an option to me. That like that's not a compromise. That is a foundational building block in how we need to do this next step.
Yeah, seems like we're at a crossroads.
Mm-hmm.
Like we either figure this out, fix this by building these distributed, very hard to censor systems, or we just get the panopticon thrown on top of us.
Yeah.
High stakes. Very high stakes.
I mean, it is, and that's what that's why I like building, this stuff so much. And I think that it's, I see, we're just still so early too, and like it's kind of easy. I think it's easy to get a little disgruntled too on like, man, like why is this not like panning out faster kind of thing? But I mean, we're still like so early, comparing it to like early days of the internet or email, whatever you want to do. I mean, we're still super early, so. Those things will come, I think things like Sphinx and whatnot are the necessary tools to start building this stuff. And like, this like, maybe Sphinx is like our Netscape in Lightning. I don't know. And then we, just go from there.
Well, it's interesting to see what we're doing get validated by OGs like Adam Curry, Podfather, who's very passionate about keeping this particular content medium as distributed as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that just naturally gravitationally pulled to Lightning as a tool to enable the possibility that podcasting can stay distributed. It's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, it is. And it's cool. I think what I like about Adam a lot is like he's always gotten it, I guess. Like there's like some people that take a lot of convincing or whatever. Adam he seemed to like just, it clicked for him that like, man, this is the perfect way that we can keep podcasting distributed and pay content creators directly, all of that stuff. So it's been really cool to work with Sphinx and Adam, and I mean I'm super excited on what's to come with that.
Yeah, I'm fanboying out. It's in the TFTC tribe.
Yeah,
I listened to the RHR last night. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's been cool.
So How do you see Voltage evolving from here? Like, do you have? I know you said you want to diversify cloud providers and stuff like that, but do you have product features in mind that you sort of haven't discussed publicly, or would like to build in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, we have like the list of things we want to build is just enormous. But so what we're ultimately building with Voltage is we're going to be offering tools to manage like the entire life cycle of how you use Bitcoin and Lightning. So we're going to be building like developer tools. So if when you're building on Lightning, it'll be a very easy process to start using the APIs or just doing tests on your app, stuff like that. And then obviously the deployment and hosting is going to be a core feature, and then also expanding into like e-commerce solutions, finance tools. The possibilities are endless. I mean, when you are, we're kind of focusing on the core product right now of building out like hosted nodes, and then what is possible, once you have the hosted nodes is very big. There's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that we want to do. So I don't want to get too into detail about all of the specific things, but that's ultimately what we're shooting for, is a way to develop, test, deploy, host, and then and then some on Voltage to make the entire process going. Developing apps on Bitcoin and Lightning to accept them in your stores, or you want to do like, I know you guys talked about how you hate the LeFi comment, whatever you want to call it, finance on Lightning, doing things like that as well. So we're really gonna take a big chunk out of how people use and develop on Lightning, and really try and drive that forward, because I think that's a big pain point we see right now. Is it can be hard to develop on Lightning across teams, especially. And then there's obviously big pain points through the whole process ongoing.
Yeah, seems like this is a very integral operation in the order of operations, right? Falling earlier in the order of operations, seems like a necessary, I don't want to say stepping stone, but piece of infrastructure to enable the type of adoption and building on top of the Lightning Network that many want to see come to the Lightning Network, but maybe what you're building at Voltage and others building similar services needs to be done first before all that can happen.
Right. And like, so it's there's a big like kind of paradigm shift between like on-chain Bitcoin and Lightning, to where like on-chain Bitcoin, it's pretty easy to develop on and use. Like you can have like an address, and like nothing has to be online ever. You can have like a browser extension that just has like the address. Like it's much easier to use in that way. And running a Bitcoin full node really isn't that hard either. It's just can be a little expensive with like the storage of it. But like on-chain Bitcoin is really not that difficult. When you talk about Lightning, it's like a completely different paradigm, because you have to have an always-on service. It needs to be backed up. Your channel states need to be in order. Like there's a whole new dynamic of it, and it requires some serious infrastructure that is not really required like on-chain Bitcoin. So that's what we're kind of offering, is this way to make that easier. Like when you're talking about large scale need for infrastructure, there has to be someone to offer that infrastructure. What I really enjoy about Bitcoin on a fundamental level is that people have the freedom to choose how they run their stuff. So like you can be a Lightning user, a Bitcoin user, and like you could keep all of your funds on Coinbase all the time. You have that right. We don't recommend it, but you have that right. And then if you want to go hardcore, you can run your own node, and you can like keep everything in cold storage. You can do your own thing. Like you have the ability to choose. Where in your traditional financial system, you basically don't. Like you either keep cash under your mattress, or you have to go to a bank account. You have to do all these other things. And so that's what I like about Lightning and Bitcoin, is people can choose their trust levels. They have knobs that they can turn where, okay, I can keep like all of my Bitcoin like in cold storage at home, but then like I can use like this hosting provider, for my Lightning Network node that, is my, access into the Lightning Network. And people just have the ability to turn those levers, which is not really present in the traditional financial system. And that's what I really enjoy about, Bitcoin too, is people have the ability to choose how self-sovereign and how they manage their money. And there's a lot of levers you can move in when you're dealing with Bitcoin and Lightning.
Yeah, optionality is huge.
Yeah.
So to sustain Bitcoin's survivability, to ensure that it can survive into perpetuity, I guess it's just making sure that the optionality still exists. When the options become fewer and fewer, that's when Bitcoin becomes less of what it's striving to be.
Right, exactly. And then, I mean, going back to like the censorability and stuff, like you have the ability to opt out, essentially. It's like you can, you see your platform censoring more and more or monitoring more and more. Okay, then you can, move to a different provider. I think that's what keeps us as like a hosting provider honest, is like people have like the ability to move. Like, they aren't necessarily tied to us. Like they can go run their own node. There's not like, it keeps us honest, and it keeps us like driving to create like the best product possible, because people do have that optionality to go do something else.
Yeah. And I guess speaking of optionality from a cloud provider perspective, just in general, you've spent a lot of time in the cloud computing space, it seems. Like, what is the current landscape of the cloud computing industry? Obviously, AWS is massive. Do you see that industry getting more centralized, or are there any competitors coming to fore? Are people starting to realize the power that AWS has and diversifying away from it? I'm pretty ignorant, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely massive. I think AWS was like 67% of like Amazon's revenue, so it's like for Amazon, it's just massive. So the people have like kind of mixed feelings about cloud in that way, but so ultimately people think that, if you run in AWS, they're like, they have access to everything and they monitor you, like crazy, which is like just not true, especially when you use like encryption like we do, to where like things that are passing across the wire, they can't even see. But I think the three major providers, I'll say, are like AWS, Google, and Azure, Microsoft. And there's quite a big split between the three, and I think it'll probably stay that way. I think that there's, some of the other solutions like DigitalOcean or some of those smaller providers, which are still competitive for sure. I think it'll probably stay that way for a while. I don't think that there will be much more consolidation than has already happened. But I think the drive to cloud is just going to be greater and greater. I think that's evident. I think I just saw an article this morning that like Capital One is going like 100% cloud. And so I think it's definitely something that is going to happen. And I think, frankly, like people like Amazon and any of the cloud providers, like they make so much money just literally reselling servers that like I think that they kind of have an incentive to within the realm of possibility, like act in good faith as well, because we have the optionality to move, and they're just making so much money on just literally reselling servers that it would be a huge revenue hit to piss a lot of people off, I guess. That being said, like there is still the whole risk of like them like shutting off your servers randomly and stuff like that. But I mean, it's I think that's you got to be doing something pretty horrible and pretty like against their terms of service to have that happen. And we aren't doing that, and it's easy to avoid as long as you're not. Their terms of service is pretty cut and dry.
What if Bitcoin gets into terms of service? You can't run a Bitcoin node.
You can't do mining on AWS, which is fair. I mean, that's I don't know.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
No, it's talking to core devs like Gleb Nelmanko, who thinks a lot about the peer-to-peer and the ISP centralization specifically. It's just interesting to have these debates. A lot of people have a weird perception of what the cloud is, and a lot of misconceptions about what it is. So I guess what are some the biggest misconceptions that you see out there that that get touted a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of like I just mentioned, the biggest misconception is like if it's in the cloud, like they automatically have access to it, they can see everything that's going on, stuff like that. But like that's possible. But if you take the right measures, like we can make that not possible through things like encryption. And that's essentially how we do it. Is everything is encrypted in transit, at rest, all the time. So if an AWS engineer got into our server and started poking around, I mean, they can't get anything. There's nothing there of substance to pull out of the server. There's nothing on disk like a macaron or something. So I think that's one of probably the biggest misconceptions is they own, you put it in the cloud and they own it, which is like not true. Like from a legal standpoint, like even in Amazon's in terms of service, they don't own what you put up there. And then when you do things like encryption, like even if they took a whole copy of your server, it's like you use encryption that the keys aren't, you don't give them access to the keys, and they can't do anything about it. So I would say that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions is the who has control of what and how it's owned in the cloud.
Yeah, everybody just assumes that Google and Amazon are able to just feed all this data and hold it on their end. Mm-hmm. I assume that, but the way you explain the encryption protection makes a lot of sense, though.
So yeah, sure. and it like it's I guess important to point out the difference between like literally running your own stuff on like a cloud compared to like using Gmail or something where like that's their service and like what they do on the back end is we don't know. But when you're running your own stuff, it's literally your own server and things like that on the clouds, and encrypt everything. I mean, you don't put the key right beside the encrypted data. You're good.
Yeah. Very good point. We're learning a lot here on Tales from the Crypt. This is what we aim to do. Graham, thank you for educating us.
It's what I'm here for.
What are you most excited? I mean, obviously outside of what you're building, we've talked about Sphinx, gaming a bit. Like, what are you most optimistic for, bullish for on the Lightning Network particularly?
So I think I definitely think just it growing. I think I'll say one is like Lightning Pool, which I know I listened to your episode with Ryan Gentry on for a while. That I think things like that are going to be really, really interesting where you can. I don't know what other term to use besides like LeFi. Like we'll have to like we need a new term if we're not going to use that. So
just use it. Just let Matt be angry in the corner.
Yeah, no, I'm already scared of like Matt like popping up in this and yelling at me. But when you start thinking about like things like that, like the more financial side of it, that gets me really excited too. Being able to like earn interest on your Bitcoin by leasing it out like through channels. I mean, I think that's a really awesome idea. And I think things like the more finance side of it is definitely going to evolve into more ways to like earn interest on your Bitcoin or do like what Atomic Finance is doing with like non-custodial loans and betting. And you get into DLCs and all of that stuff. I think the financial applications of that are going to start coming online, pretty heavily in the coming year or so. So I think that's probably the next step that I'm super excited about and I'm watching is a lot of those financial tools, and then things like RGB and beyond, where you're talking about like tokenizing things like on Bitcoin. That's really exciting too.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it leads me back to an earlier part of the conversation when you're saying like how early are we as this early internet. And that's like a debate I have in my mind a lot. It's obviously not happening as fast as I thought it was going to happen, like 2013. So like chart, like you think it's going to happen really fast and it happens a lot slower, and then you think it's going to take a lot longer, but it actually happens like quicker than you think after it doesn't happen as fast as you thought it was going to happen. The point I'm trying to make here is like I think fundamentals are getting to a spot where the ability to build, particularly on Lightning, is going to lead to like an explosion of innovation over the next 3 to 5 years that I don't want to say mainstream, but like close to mainstream would bring the Bitcoin network and its applications close to mainstream. Just like using Sphinx this week alone, I was like, holy shit. Like the fact that they have a podcast player in it and people can just send 100 sats in the middle, that's pretty revolutionary.
Yeah, I think it's easy to like kind of look back and be like, man, like this is like moving slower than I thought. But I mean, then you kind of got to look at things like Sphinx and whatnot, and it's like, wow, like this is actually like there is really cool things being built that have like, you know, real world use that, you know, people are using today. So I mean, it's a battle that I have in my head too sometimes of like how like are we moving, like is this moving fast, like is this moving too fast, are we, you know, not moving fast enough? And I think that's something that like is also a testament to like the difference between like Lightning and Bitcoin and like Ethereum is like we are intentionally, I think, moving slower in Bitcoin because we're like making sure like things are right and like really safe before like taking the next step. And I think that's kind of the difference in like Ethereum's, like, you know, all of the things going on in Ethereum is like, well, they kind of like YOLO'd it and like just went with it. And it's like, here's the thing, like, you know, we didn't have time to audit it, but like put $1 million into it. Where we're like in Lightning is like, okay, we're gonna release this, we're gonna limit your channels to like make sure that like things are good for a while, and then we're gonna like bump it up, and like, you know, I think the build speed is completely dependent on what you want to achieve. Like, you know, a quick like tool that is, you know, that you want to get out today, or like, are you building for like the future of like using it like on a global scale that is going to last for like eternity. And I think that's the difference. That's the trade-off you really got to consider when you're thinking about timelines is like, what are you building for? Are you building for like the next 2 years? Or are you building for the next like 200 years?
7th generation thinking, baby. Bring it to Lightning Network development. It's
yeah, exactly.
Right. It's crazy seeing the short-term trade-off of like, let's YOLO build it. Blowing up in people's faces again and again, like we saw this week with the Geth bug. It's still not fully disclosed, and we don't really know what happened, but we do know that everybody was forced to update to the latest version of Geth at the full node consensus level on Ethereum, which is not what you want to see, and it could be potentially a testament to the fact that they YOLO this stuff.
Right, and that's, I mean, That's something I appreciate about Bitcoin and the Lightning Network is that we aren't YOLOing things. We are thinking, you know, long term of like, okay, how do we build this to like protect users and like, you know, give them control and make sure that this is like going to work, you know, at a huge scale, which I think things like RGB and Lightning are made for, is that, you know, we don't like, we want to touch like the chain as little as possible and like do as much as we can, like, you know, off chain, and building for scalability and like in the long term, I think is going to be, it inherently makes the process longer, but it's like, it's important. Like it's something that we have to do.
Yeah, it's something worth doing. It's worth doing right and taking your time
right.
to do it.
Exactly.
And yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how quickly Lightning Pool gets traction, if it does. Yet to be a foregone conclusion. Seems very, very much like a good idea to me, especially when you consider the alternatives. Like if you're able to put your Bitcoin up on Lightning Pool just to distill it down to its most basic form and return, get a yield on that Bitcoin in a non-custodial fashion, like if you can build out a UI and UX that is comparable to a BlockFi, like why would you ever take the custodial? I shouldn't pick on BlockFi, but like a custodial interest-bearing savings account. Why would you take that trade-off of it being custodial? And then like I don't even think they'd be able to compete on interest due to the fact that they're centralized. And the point I'm trying to get here, though, is like if Lightning Pool is successful, it will bring liquidity, which will bring utility to the Lightning Network as well. And I think you'll see a sort of domino effect of building and usage and things getting tested and more secure. I guess it's a chicken and egg problem. You need the liquidity to sort of incite use, and that discovers pain points and then flushes over those pain points. And that's what, like, when I get back from this little trip I'm on, I'm going to like try really hard to get set up a Lightning pool and start selling some liquidity just to see what it's like.
I think it's obviously a great idea for both sides, like exactly what you're saying about like earning interest. You have some Bitcoin laying around. I mean, why not earn some interest on it? And then also from like the onboarding perspective of, new users, like the way to create channels is like, I mean, I get the question a lot of like, okay, I have a node, like where do I create channels to now? And it's like, well, like, what's your use case? What are you trying to do? Yada, yada, yada. And doing, just having just pool, just saying, well, just, put an ask out there or a bid and just try and just, get matched. Like, you don't even have to think about it. Like, just, you get matched with someone and, you get a channel and, you go. Like, there's, I think it's going to be huge for onboarding too. And just like finding the channels. Like, I think there's a Telegram group right now to like try and meet up with people to like open channels to like benefit each other. And it's like, well, that's very archaic. And I think pool is
not
like
scalable.
Yeah. I mean, that's not going to work. So like, I think pool is going to be the way to, to ease that pain.
So is there a way you guys could integrate this for your users?
Yes. We are actively looking into that. To do it the way we want to do it, there's a few features that are needed on the pool side, which I think it's like they're in their next like minor release. I think they're planning on adding it in, but we're definitely looking at adding pool into ours to make the onboarding easier. To when you basically purchase a node on our platform, you get a channel with it, kind of thing. That is certainly within the realm of possibility, and that's something we're trying for.
Yeah, is that even something you could put like in a package deal? Like, buy this 3-month hosting, plus we'll open X amount of channels with Y liquidity.
Yeah.
Y amount of sats. Interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely something we're looking into, and I think that'll be a huge help for like onboarding, like I said, of just you get a node with a channel. Like, there's when you think about Lightning, like, and how you want to scale it and like really like big use case, like the managing channels and like all of these things that we have to do today, it should be abstracted. I think that once we get like things like autopilot like working like in a really nice way and things like pool, we're like knowing, like having to manage your channels and like do all of this stuff, just manually and being really cognizant of it will, I think, if we do it right, you won't even have to think about it. Like, managing your node and doing all the stuff that you have to do today will just be completely abstracted. But again, talking about the optionality, if you want to manage it, you can. But for like most users, it's kind of backgrounded.
Yeah. Now I'm like, this has got me thinking, like, what does this do for routing services like Voltage? Arguably increases it, right? Like, does it decentralize it though? If you're
talking about Lightning Pool?
No, well, a combination of Pool and Voltage. Like, if you were to partner with Pool and buy liquidity on behalf, or allow your users to buy liquidity via Voltage. But yeah, no, the Pool order book would be filled with a bunch of different routing nodes. So that wouldn't be, it's not like you're buying centralized liquidity from the same routing node. So yeah, could arguably decentralize routing.
Yeah, I think Pool inherently kind of spreads the routing around better. So it's not like everyone has a channel open to like, the 5 biggest nodes on the network. It spreads it out more. So it's, more of that, like that distributed layout of the routing. And then for like Voltage specifically, like we don't have like a central hub like all nodes connect to. Like the nodes are kind of like their own thing. So there's not like a central routing node, in Voltage right now that everyone goes through. So when we hook up like Voltage nodes with like Lightning Pool, it's like, I think it'll be very distributed, and that, you get your channels from Pool. And from what I understand, Pool has like some ways of like, making sure that the graph is distributed, and it's not like it's not only opening channels to like, open node or someone.
Yeah. Yeah, this is incredible.
Yeah,
The future is bright, Graham.
it is. I mean, we're ultimately like, we're going to get to a point where like, like obviously managing a node is like, dead simple and you don't have to like do hardly anything. But so we're also going to get to a point where like, I think having like a remote always on node is going to be like a necessity, because you think about, scaling out Lightning and like things with like Sphinx and everything. Your node is like your entry point into Sphinx or whatever. And the more more services hook onto that, like the more important having like an always on node will be. So when you think like, if you have an always on node, like you can share channels across like, any device. You don't have to like open channels on like your desktop wallet and then duplicate the channels on like your mobile wallet. Your channels are in like one place, and you can use like the Jewel browser extension to like, trade on Ellen markets, use the same node to like communicate on Sphinx. It all goes, it's all one entity essentially. And then you don't have like the vendor tie down of software. If you have a remote always on node, you can use Zap one day, and if Zap pushes out an update you don't like, okay, start using Zeus. Like you completely have the option to choose, what softwares you use and what tools you use. And you don't have to do like kind of tricks and weird things about like being like turning on like the node when you have a payment coming in or things like that, like Phoenix is doing. I think those are cool, but like, if realistically thinking that, like, how is that going to scale? And then you're kind of at the mercy of like the OS to like allow you to do that. And so if you have like a remote always on node, I mean, you can receive and send payments like, whenever. You can like receive messages like on Sphinx, whenever. I think as the Lightning Network progresses and more people start hooking onto nodes like Sphinx is doing, a remote always on node is going to be like necessary. It's like your internet identity, when you're thinking about like LSAT and like the auth of it, you're having a node is going to be like a very important thing. It's going to be like one of those things where it's like, I mean, it's your online identity. It's your access point into Sphinx or, LN markets or whatever river, all of these things will, I think, ultimately be able to tie back into, a Lightning Network node. And it's going to be your entry point to the internet.
Yeah, the digital passport, if you will,
Yes.
for people describe it. That stuff gets like mind-blowing when you think about LSAT, LNURL auth. Like, mind-blowing, being able to create many different, basically, usernames via public keys. They're assigned with one private key representing the password.
Yeah.
Like we can't even fathom the type of applications that are going to be built out of the basics and the primitives, if you will, created by these types of use cases and applications. One question.
Yeah, totally. And that, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to go down a different path. I'll let you finish.
No, go down that path, and then I'll ask my questions. Like, if you got something related to that train of thought, let's roll.
Well, okay. So I was going to expand on like the difference. Like, I mean, obviously I'm biased in like how you should run your node. Everyone should run on voltage because like that's the greatest thing ever, right? But they're like when you're thinking about running like nodes at home, like the one thing people always like forget about is like using like power backups. And like that's probably like the most important thing. Like when you look at all of these like node guides of like how to set them up at home, like no one has a power backup on it. But like I have seen so many GitHub issues and like people in like the Slack channels about, hey, like my cat tripped over the power cord, or like my power went out and I don't have a power backup, and like then they're screwed. I mean, they're not, if they have a channel backup, they have to restart, but they're okay. But they're like there's problems with running your node at home that I don't think people realize when you talk about like, power failures. Like that is like a big deal for your node, because that will, could corrupt your database, and then you're kind of SOL. You have to use like a static channel backup, which force closes all your channels, but you can regain your funds at least. And then the fact that like, I think the Raspberry Pi is probably like the number one, probably the only realistic way to run a node at home. But like a Raspberry Pi is like almost like a toy computer made for like, learning how to code, and like it was made to be as cheap as possible to be a very good entry point into learning how to code and using Linux and things like that. And so when you think about like running Bitcoin Core or LND or all of these like, kind of intensive processes on like the cheapest hardware possible, I mean, I wouldn't do it. And I think that it's something that people need to really think about in running like nodes. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't run nodes at home. I'm all about, decentralizing the network and running your own nodes. I think you just need to really think about how you're doing it, and like have like, don't use hard disk drives, use like solid state, use power backups, use good power cords. Like if you have a cheap power cord, like that can not give your node enough power. There's a lot to think about that people really need to be cognizant of when like doing these like Raspberry Pi builds. I think it's, go ahead. I just think it's something that's overlooked, like across, when people are setting up these nodes at home. Like I think, again, people should totally do that, but like you need to be aware of like what is required, and like this isn't like, if you're using your node in any kind of serious manner, like it's not something that you just kind of set and forget and put it on this cheap hardware and like, leave it alone. You got to really be cognizant of like you have a disaster recovery scenarios, and like what happens when the USB connector on the Raspberry Pi board, gets loose, like things like that people don't think about.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's actually pretty much related to what I was going to ask you before we went down this train of thought. It was, so for the Uncle Jim at home who does want to run this Raspberry Pi node, is there a way to like pair that node with voltage as like a backup, or vice versa?
So not really. So kind of yes and no. Like how, like you with the Lightning Network, you only can have like one node on at a time. There's not like you couldn't have two nodes with like the same public key, like broadcasting to the network. You're gonna have a bunch of problems if you do that. So I haven't thought about it a whole lot, frankly, but like maybe one day it would be possible to have like a backup node on voltage that like your node at home is like syncing files to. It gets really complicated because you got to be very careful about like channel states and stuff. If you broadcast like an old state, you risk losing all your funds. So I don't see that being like, it would probably take a lot of work to make sure it's really right, and a lot of testing. So I wouldn't recommend that for anyone right now. And like in Voltage, we give you the ability to like download all of your files from your node. Like you can do an export of literally like the whole LND directory. We give you everything. We don't necessarily recommend people like take those and run them at home, just because of like the architecture differences between like our servers and your nodes at home. Like if you're using like a 32-bit, Raspberry Pi, like it's not going to work. And like there's a lot of risk involved. And if you turn your node on at home while you're running it on Voltage, again, you're going to have problems. So we give you all of the files to like download, for yourself, but you just got to be very, very careful about like not having two nodes on at once, and like make sure the architectures are the same. So there's a lot of intricacies with it that make it really complex. I mean, it maybe down the road there is a solution there to have like an HA like backup node like in the cloud and have your one at home. That is definitely something that we have been kind of thinking about, but like as it stands today, it would be very difficult to do it in the right way.
Yeah. Right, because the Short Bits guys put out like a spec for a fail-safe node or something like that earlier this year, or late last year. Yeah, so I read that post, and we have a kind of a thing that's more like enterprisey called like Lightning clusters, which is like very similar to that, to where you basically have like two nodes, and one of them is basically off, and then they're syncing. They either have channel states in like a remote database, or they're like syncing files between the two. And then say one of them fails, there's like a health check that notices that it fails and then turns on the other one, and it has all of that channel state. So we do the same thing with that. It's just that's like it's I guess a more advanced setup. That would be difficult to do like from an at-home node to a remote node. It's easy when they're in the same location and can basically use like the same like remote database. Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah, so it's hard to do that between a server in the cloud or a cloud server and a device you have at home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's not
Okay.
impossible. It's just there would be a lot there to get right, especially from like a voltage perspective, because we'd have to I guess provision a database for that user and then give them like access to it. It gets really hairy, and it gets like super technical to where it's like, okay, is this worth it, because it's so technically intensive to like set up at home? It's like, is it ultimately even a benefit?
Yeah, it's a UX hurdle.
Yeah.
Interesting. Fascinating. Well, Graham, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I've learned a lot. I'm more bullish on the Lightning Network than I was before this conversation started. And that's pretty hard to do, considering I'm very bullish on the Lightning Network. People are sleeping on the Lightning Network, I think. There's a lot of haters out there.
I agree.
And I like that.
What the thing that really drives me nuts is people that compare like Lightning Network capacity to like wrap Bitcoin or something like that. And it's like, they're just totally not the same thing at all. And the other aspect of it is like, you don't know how much is really on the Lightning Network. You and I could have $1 billion channel between the two of us that's private, and like no one would ever know about it. And
right.
So when people talk about like, I think like capacity on the Lightning Network and it being, maybe they quote subpar to like, wrap Bitcoin or any of those other things, like that's just that. To me, that signals that you don't know what you're talking about. Like, they're different things, and it's impossible to know how much is really on the Lightning Network.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's and then you factor in the fact that like wrapped Bitcoin is not on Ethereum; it's in a Bitcoin multisig, and
yeah,
you spun up a token to represent that Bitcoin in a multi. There's no Bitcoin on Ethereum,
right?
It's very disingenuous of an argument, I would argue. Yeah. And yeah, the private channel stuff, like you never know. It's like the beauty of it too. It's like
right.
how big could this, I want to call it a dark economy, because you don't even have to make the assumption that people are doing things that others would deem are nefarious, but just the dark matter economy that you don't know that's being facilitated via the private channel infrastructure Lightning Network.
Right. And there could be like, two exchanges that have like a private channel that is just like, loaded like crazy, and they're just, they're doing something, between their two systems that is managing liquidity or something, and it could be, several $1 million in just like a one channel, and like, we don't know about it, like, and that's what's great is like not everything is public in the Lightning Network, which is, you have the chain for that, and then this layer 2 and beyond is, needs to be private like that.
Yeah. Damn, now you got my mind running about potential revenue streams. Like, if these exchanges are opening big private channels, they may know the Lightning Network's infrastructure. It's notorious that exchanges have a lot of Bitcoin in cold storage. What if they were to put some of that cold storage Bitcoin into a Lightning pool liquidity provider and just get more interest on that? Just another revenue stream. And you could like that, and all the stuff we're talking about here. Like a lot of people like to talk about the closed loop Bitcoin economy. It seems like the primitives are being laid in place to make it actually happen. I think the Lightning pool giving Bitcoin holders the ability to create a risk-free rate of return on their Bitcoin is massive, because it disincentivizes people to leave the closed loop system.
Yeah. And I think just as it builds out, like that will come. And I think like all of the Ethereum tokens and things like that, like that will be on Bitcoin, whatever is like valuable enough, that is necessary to be on Bitcoin. Like with Filecoin, like we can do that like on Bitcoin without a token, like through the Lightning Network, and having like pointers and have a decentralized like file system. Like it's all of it is basically totally possible to be built on top of Bitcoin. And I think it's just a matter of time for people to actually go and build it and make the stuff.
Yeah, it's just a matter of time before people start building on the infrastructure you're building out to make a lot of this possible. So thank you for doing the hard grunt work, laying the foundation that will make things in the future possible. These ideas that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. This is very exciting for us, and we're really excited about, you know, Lightning Network and how this is going to evolve. And I think we're on the verge of like some massive growth with the Lightning Network through like people like us, through Sphinx and all of these, you know, things. I think that the last several years have been, you know, very foundational work to like get the building blocks like super tight, and now we're like I think we're at that point where we're going to really start ramping up like crazy.
Hell yeah. Well, I wish you luck. I'm excited to follow the developments of what's going on at Voltage and the adoption by users, enterprise and individual around the world. Are there any parting thoughts, final messages you want to get out to the freaks out there?
Just check us out. Our website's getvoltage.io. You can get a Lightning node through us for starting at $10 a month. So check us out. We offer a free trial too, so create a node for free and, you know, just try it out. Get on the Lightning Network. Get on Sphinx. We'll be hopefully adding a Sphinx integration here really, really soon. So anyone that is running on Voltage will get access to Sphinx too. So yeah, check us out, and yeah, go Lightning.
Yeah, go Lightning. If you're on Sphinx, check out the TFTC tribe.
Yes,
Graham's a member. There's a little over a dozen of us now. I can't even say dozens yet, but hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah,
Graham,
for sure.
Thank you for taking some time to do this. Thank you for being flexible in your schedule. I know we had to move this by a couple of days and then a couple of hours. So I really appreciate your flexibility. And yeah, and like, again, I want to echo the thank you for building out this critical infrastructure, which makes a lot of sense. I like the way you guys are doing with everything encrypted, and you don't have access to the macaroon. You can't really control anything in the node. That's massive for making this a viable path forward from a scaling perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is, like I said, this is something that we think is necessary, and we want to do it in, you know, the most user-centric way.
Hell yeah. That's all we got this week, freaks. Peace and love.